46, on the Fire Department Administration parking lot, a resolution approving the plan, specifications, form of contract documents, engineer's estimate, and designation of the lowest responsible bidder as PG Construction, Inc., Keith Purdy, President, $62,608.74. This item was continued from our May 5th, 2014 agenda. Council Communication number 14-234A is approving the contract and the bond and permission to sublet. Anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Yes, sir.
Mayor, County, members of the council, Mel Pins, President of Somerset Neighborhood, 210 East Bundy. I'll make my comments brief here. I've reviewed the proposal here, and what was done on Devon Avenue with building the new fire training center and station is awesome. It's really great to see the investment in the infrastructure. I like to see our fire department have what they need for good facilities, good equipment, good training. But one of the things that we've continued to struggle with as neighborhoods is the scope of service. The service that the fire department provides is a number one, but I know that they're stretched, I know that they're taxed, but I know just like a combat soldier, the men and women at the fire department will still carry out their mission. No matter how fatigued they are, if they come to your door, you think they're just there to help you. And I'm not sure how the money works on all this, but if you do approve this, I would like to see you continue to work to try to support keeping our fire department members where they can be stationed where they need to. It's been very confusing for me to try to keep track of who's been moved to what station, what paramedic unit is there, and how many people are on an engine. I don't claim to be the expert on that. I know there's some folks that have followed that closely. But I am concerned about how we do spend that money. I'd like to support our people as much as possible. Maybe this is from a different pot. I don't know. But I'd like to see you invest in any staffing as much as possible with the fire department if you can. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Anybody else want to speak on this item? Let's go ahead and close the hearing. Comments from council members?
I have a few comments. This is in my ward. I've struggled with this project. Probably, I think it was on the agenda maybe the first time I sat down here, and I referred it back. As everyone knows, everyone sitting up here, we have a staffing problem. And I've heard that this is two different pots, but where do you draw the line where you trade public safety for a parking lot? Now that to me, there should be no question what we do. And if we're going to say it's a different pot, then I can think of 6 different parks that I would give $10,000 to put equipment in that not even in my ward, all of them. So, I mean, I understand the chief has tried to work with us on a pilot program that he's set up to where, and Rick's been involved in that, and we've sat down. I feel the pilot program that is in effect is doomed to fail. And that's because we're gonna put it in service when we have enough staff. It's gonna be close to the other station, so how many calls it's gonna get, it's unclear. Station number 1 is the medics running 15, 20 runs on a 24-hour period. I don't want to be number 15. I don't think any of us sitting here want to be number 15. You know, we need to look at that. We need to take a step back, prioritize what we're doing, and this just brings it to the forefront. I mean, this is something that we need to take a good look at, and I'm not comfortable with supporting this. I don't know if I've wanted to sit down with everybody in the room. I guess legal says that's not possible for me to sit down with everybody in a room. So I don't know what type of, can the mayor form a committee that then we can all sit down and try to figure out what we can do. But there's a disconnect somewhere between the guys on the street and the chief and the department, and I don't think it's running like it should. When a month before I was elected, I have an emergency call at my restaurant. and it's 11 minutes before an ambulance gets here. That's a lot. That's a long time for an ambulance to come to somebody. 2 weeks ago on a Friday night, I had a man collapse in my restaurant, and the next day he ended up having a pacemaker. He went down, I had to pick him up by his legs, I laid him down. Now, the engine got there from Medic 6, but there wasn't an ambulance there. You know, he was able to be revived. He was okay. I didn't have to give him CPR, but, you know, my waitress said I was giving CPR, so they were rushing there. And I appreciate the hard work that all of them do. I appreciate the work that the chief's done. I appreciate what my colleagues have done with the budget. But I really feel that the longer I've sat here and the more experience I've got, we've got a serious problem. And we need to take a look at that. And so I'm not supportive of this. I don't know if we can set up a task force, set something up, or I won't support this at all. And I hope that we all take a good look at public safety or a parking lot. And I know we can say it's two different funds. It's all coming from the same people. So we need to take a look at that, how we're going to spend our funds. And if it's two different funds, like I said, I'll give it to the Parks Department. I'd rather spend $62,000, and it doesn't have to be in Ward 4. I'd prefer it in Ward 4 for equipment. But I know I toured parks on Friday, and there's one in Bob's ward that doesn't have any equipment. It was right where my wife grew up at. It's all yanked out of there. So how are we going to spend this money? With a parking lot? If we need a tanker truck to sit there, then let's put it somewhere else. We've got plenty of room that we can find a spot for the tanker truck. And isn't that going to be an eyesore, having a tanker truck sitting behind a $10 million building? It just doesn't make sense to me, and I won't support it. And I appreciate all your comments, and my motion is to deny it.
Okay, any other discussion? Points? Anybody else?
When we pulled it off last time, we did ask some other questions about the use of this building, training and other things. And we had very little information last time. Can you at least respond to some of the technicalities in terms of the use of this, what the purpose is of the parking lot, who it's going to serve?
Mr. Coleman, council members, the chief could say it more precisely than I can, but it meets not only the parking needs of the building, but also an important training function. And it's really both of these needs that's driving the decision. The funding for this is coming from the project account that originally built the building, so there was a capital account established for that purpose. I'm just reading from the blue letter, which talks about this in a little bit more detail, but it's essentially the training function that's setting up the urgency here, but we do need parking for the facility. And one of the things about that training facility is it's turned out to be very popular, and there's a lot of folks that come there, and the parking is a necessary thing. So maybe if you want to, if you need more information, I can have the chief comment in greater detail.
Chief, do you want to step up and comment on this?
One quick thing, I've been to that facility twice, once for a neighborhood meeting, that there was 4 cars there, plus myself, and I've been there to meet with the chief at 10:30, and I think there was 2 cars in the parking lot. So, I mean, I'm not sure, maybe it was at 10:30, but I don't know where, I mean, I parked on the other side of the building where you guys didn't park at.
I parked on the other side.
Yeah, I parked on the other side of the building, there was plenty of parking where I was at.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, John Kipp, Chief of the Fire Department. It does serve both the parking purpose and the training purpose, but you really can't put bids out for the training pad. It's all concrete that serves the dual purpose. So maybe it was a little unfair to the training function to call it parking lot. But the truth of the matter is, we do need additional parking out there, particularly when we have seasonal other city employees from the Parks Department who are coming in and doing their training. When we do Iowa Law Enforcement Academy training, hazardous materials task force, group meetings, and those kinds of things. Several things for our CPAT function when we're bringing in new recruits. It's not every day, but but very frequently, that we fill and exceed the parking there, and then we bleed out into the neighborhood, and we'd like to avoid that. This won't actually alleviate all of that, but the key for me is this allows a training prop, which originally came to the Des Moines Fire Department in 1989. This is a durable good, and it was a mobile prop. And what firefighters, and in particular members of the hazardous materials team, will do is they will use it to practice drilling, cutting holes in this. It's made of aluminum. It looks like a rail car. Actually, it will look very much like all of the rail cars that are on the tracks directly behind it, about 20 feet. Only ours will be in much better condition. It is true that I would agree with Councilmember Gatto and the firefighters and everyone else, and all of the members of council who lived through all those very tough decisions about resources and numbers of people, and we are about as thin as we can be, and no one's arguing that point. The thing about this project is, while not in the original scope of the contracted service for that project, it was one of the pieces of the original design concept that came before the council. Actually, it went into many more things, the towers and other things, other phases of the training facility. When we got done with the training logistics facility project, there was some of that CIP money available to tackle one of those pieces. This comes in at $18,000 under the $80,000 estimate. That does not that doesn't address your concern on the staffing end, but on the training end, it's a great opportunity. There is an opportunity to be lost here if we decide to not do the training pad. I would disagree in that if we do not add to the space, the concrete, we will have to turn down the training prop. And we're getting it back from Iowa State because they no longer have the space for it in their reorganization. And so there aren't any other takers. There aren't anyone that has the size of service that has the potential to house this. So we'll scrap the prop if eventually this isn't done. And I've had conversations with Randy Novak with the Iowa State Training Bureau, and we knew that was a reality. And so originally we would not have sought this, but then we came in under budget on the project, and we thought, oh, this is a win not only for the Des Moines Fire Department, but all of the different fire departments that we partner with through our 20AD for hazardous materials. We protect 723,000 Iowans with that team, and we thought this was a great opportunity to train a lot of people for a relatively small amount of funds. So.
Chief, do we actually generate additional revenue for your department as a result of the training that you host there with all these other groups coming in?
No, we don't. Most of the training that we do is just collaboration of different departments. Within the 2080 agreement for hazardous materials, there are fees for service for that, and we have people come in, and we more often go out and provide training for them. That's a part of that arrangement. Mm-hmm. But for all the other things we do with the 71st Civil Support Team, we're just working together.
Okay.
And that was one of the goals of this facility, was to try to build as many relationships that are exactly of that nature.
Chief, I think that as a council, we agreed with you in terms of constructing the facility. Public safety, I think we all see as number one. Certainly through fire and our police department. And one of our responsibilities as elected officials is to look at policy and to set budgets. And, I hear you talking about being thin in terms of your manning. I think that what I'm hearing from Councilmember Gatto is he has some concern as well. And as we're talking about our budget, and we're talking about the future of Des Moines, and we know how Des Moines is expanding, and I know that there's some issues in Ward 4. I think there's some issues in Ward 2. And we have some things going on there. Occasionally I hear from some of my neighbors in Ward 3 that there's, some issues in 1. I mean, I believe that, for me, if the council would agree to do it, that we ought to put together, as we're trying to think about budgets and think about policy, and it's an ever ongoing issue, public safety, and certainly we're trying to always operate within the constraints and deliver maximum public safety within our available resources. But I think that we're hearing enough about this issue that we ought to put together a little task force, maybe as Councilmember Gatto, and work with you and your folks to talk to us about, public safety, budgeting, what your plans are, how you're going to use resources, because we get asked this. I go to 58 different neighborhood meetings, as well as, occasionally Des Moines neighbors and Northeast neighbors and some of these collective groups. They ask questions like this, and I think that we need to understand where we're going, what we're going to do, and make reasonable explanations to these folks about how we're budgeting and how we're prioritizing and how we're setting policy for the future of the city of Des Moines as elected officials. I understand it's your job to run the fire department and do all that kind of stuff, but I'd like to work with you and work with the council so we can get our arms around some of these issues, because these are important things, and I agree with you, public safety and Des Moines Fire has highest respect from everybody. Often, they're going on a lot of runs, they're doing a lot of stuff, and when we need them, they're always there. Want to get them trained up right. We want to make sure that how we fashion our delivery of service and backup and public safety meets the needs of all the 206,483 citizens of Des Moines.
I agree. Our people are incredible, and they work very hard. I think the opportunity to settle some of those policy things would be a real win for everybody. And all of those conversations that result in more firefighters, you'll just see me smile more and more. So I look forward to having those conversations.
I think we ought to start that sooner rather than later.
Sure.
And maybe we can set up some way to fashion it, knowing again, looking to our legal advisor, that probably only 3 of us at a time could participate in this, but I would certainly like to participate, and sounds to me like Councilmember Gatto would appreciate.
I'd like to volunteer for that task force.
And we'll have additional and better information as well later in the year and heading into the next budget process as we look at the station location, because there'll be a lot of effects budget-wise in our longer-term planning, both on the capital side and on the operating side, because we know that we can't add those facilities without adding people. So,
How many parking spots, when that building was built, did you guys build it for? And how many people do you normally train on a given time? How many parking spots are in that building?
I don't know the number of parking spots in the
Okay.
building. I know that we have.
Wouldn't we, if we're
people.
going to build a $10 million building, wouldn't we know how many people are going to be in our next class and try to plan ahead and say, well, we need 50-some parking spots. We're not going to go back to the council and try to get $60,000 for additional parking. I mean, that just doesn't, it just doesn't, this whole thing just does not add up to me in any way, shape, or form. And I just, and Chief, that's why I'm struggling with it, because if this thing started off $82,000 and it started causing everyone grief because I drew it to everyone's attention, and it comes in at $62,000. Now, maybe I need to start causing grief to everyone and we'll get less money on all of our bids. I'm not sure. But that's a considerable amount from engineering department to tell us it's $82,000 and now it's $62,000. That's a lot. That's $20,000. I mean, that's a significant percentage in a bid.
That's good.
Well, it's great, but I mean, how much more is left out of the pot that you put back in when you didn't build the rest of the training facility? I'd like to know that from the CIP.
I believe the original amount that was via email communication was just in excess of $100,000. So the goal wasn't to spend what was left.
Right.
But we did make an assessment for what were we not able to do that existed within that, and we approached it from that manner.
So that's why we didn't put the tower up? I mean, are we gonna come back and ask to put the tower up now, or did we not have money in the first
No,
bid process for that
that
building?
was never in the scope. That would be a hundreds of thousands of dollars likely kind of project. It would have to be its own separate.
So you're gonna take the railroad car, similar to a railroad car, sit it behind this brand-new building, and you're going to cut holes in it and train back there, and can you see it from the neighborhood?
Yeah, you could probably see it. I don't know if you would be able to distinguish it from the tracks that would be.
How
would be
many,
directly
since
behind it.
1989, how many holes are in it? How many holes are in it?
You cut a hole in a piece of aluminum, then you replace that piece of aluminum, then you cut the hole. So you're not eating up the car, but you have the right kinds of connections and elevations and angles and things that you keep replacing a piece, and then you destroy that piece.
And how many firefighters do you, out of your 285 firefighters, how many train on this thing? How many do you train with that?
Well, the team would be 45. My hope would be to train 206. That's the
So
number.
you want to train them all on this, you're gonna bring them all in and train them as you put this car down there?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, you said 206, not 285.
Well, there's 45 people on the hazardous materials team, and I know that we have 206 which are at the operations level. So minimally 206.
More.
No, 206 total. That
Okay.
includes the 45.
I just wanted to make sure, because.
Isn't there 285 firefighters you have? Or no? Am I incorrect? Or how many
There's
firefighters?
285, but I'm not going to learn how to cut a hole in it. And there are other positions. There's
don't.
285.
So the administration part of it is not
Right.
going to
We
learn
have
how to.
shop, we have mechanics, we have civilian employees. There's a number of people who would not ever perform.
So once you put the car down, when we put this pad, how many additional parking spots do you get on the site plan?
I'd have to ask Jeb Brewer, but I think it's around 12.
Okay. I mean, I haven't seen a site plan, I haven't seen anything, I haven't seen any screening for this thing. I mean, it's just, I'm gonna come back, I haven't used 100,000, so I want 60,000 to lay this concrete pad. I mean, that, to me, that's not gonna fly. I mean, it's not right that we're gonna do this. We're trading public safety for this, and these things just don't add up. I mean, I'd love to be on that task force to see what we can do about, because I know there's some problems in Bob's ward where the response times are different and things like that. So we definitely need to take a good look at what we're gonna do in the next budget cycle.
Well, it needs to be started planning now for the next
Absolutely.
budget cycle, because it's not just easily to cover those costs.
No.
Because you need a new station, we got about 500 additional residents out in northeast Des Moines, and there's no really close-by coverage.
No, there's no doubt about it. There's not going to be an easy fix, and unfortunately, we're short on revenue, and I've said that since I've sat down. I mean, revenue's a problem. But we can't take money like this and just, I would rather give this money and put it in a park instead of a parking lot. Since it's a CIP fund, you know what? That's what I'd like to see happen with this. Because I've seen a lot of parks that need some equipment. Cray Park needs some. There's a lot of them, so.
Is this just parking, or there's a training pad? You're actually going to use it
This
for?
will actually, there'll be parking spots on it, and there'll be fixtures placed in where we will come in and affix this tanker car to the ground. And so while it is being used for training, it cannot be used for parking, and while it's not being used for training, people will be able to park on it.
Okay, Mr. Coleman, and then Ms. Hensley.
I've attended a couple meetings with Joe. I know he's serious about this, and he makes really good points. He's articulated to me that this was not a issue that he went looking for. It found him when, unfortunately, somebody got sick in his restaurant, and I respect you for it. On the issue with the parking garage, I am going to differ with you, but mainly out of history where I've been. I voted for the original design of the facility. We cut back elements thinking that we had to in order to meet the budget. Then we made the budget. It's not that we keep dripping money into this bucket. It's that we didn't have to spend it all. It came in under what we estimated. So the idea was to move this back in as if as if it was originally built with it. And now we've saved another, $20,000 off the bid. So, my history is that it was the council that took it out, said we couldn't afford it. If we would have known that we would have been under budget, we probably would have included it then. And it meets the overall budget that we had for the facility. That's issue number one. Issue number two, which I think you're hearing a lot of consensus about, and we wouldn't be talking about it without you, is that we really have to get to a discussion about the way we treat and address fire issues in our community. And, the chief probably surprised me with his level of support when he used the word thin. But he's an honest guy, and he's going to tell it as it is. To me, I hope we set up some kind of group that works with the chief and the city manager to look at where we're headed on this. My recommendation, and I'm not trying to squeeze off any of the volunteers that have already been there, you can go to work on this. My recommendation is to look out 10 years and say, what do we need it to look like then? The trends are staggering. The number of fire service calls we've had over the last 40 years have gone down dramatically, and the number of EMS calls have gone up at a level that is astounding. I think it would surprise everybody in town. And I don't know anything about those two trends that are going to change materially. But what we know is that we have not changed the way we do fire service that dramatically over the last 40 years. We take a truck and we take EMS and we try and get 4 people there as quick as we can. At some point we're going to have to say Des Moines is going to develop a new model, or we're not going to be able to afford the kind of service that our citizens need. And it could be a drastically different model. And I think that's what we have to start thinking about, how we do that, 10 years from now. I don't know what the answer is, and many of you have studied fire much more than I have. But it sure makes sense to me that we have to start thinking about the way we respond to medical calls differently than we respond to fire calls. And right now, we respond, pretty consistently regardless of the calls that come in.
I said that the first meeting you and I sat down.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a staggering difference, sorry.
Christine and then Skip.
I'm going to support the recommendation here. Reason being, I look at this as no different than a change order on a project. And we're adding this. Joe, I'm thrilled to death that it came in at $62,000. I know we've been lucky. It just depends on the bid environment. And we do get a lot of bids that come in less than what the engineer's estimate is. And we're always thrilled when that happens because you're never really certain. I'm supportive of a task force and/or / a committee, whatever it ends up being called. However, a word of caution. I sense from some of the comments that there's a feeling that there can be some discussion about day-to-day operations here, and that's not the role of the council. The role of the council is a policy-making body. And so I think it's very clear to everybody that sits down and is part of that committee or task force that we don't slip into saying, well, we want to do this, this, and this, and we need to get pay increases and we need to do this, because just based upon a lot of the discussion that's been out there, I think that that's a very high probability that could happen. So I would look to legal and others to make sure that we don't go down that road.
Skip. And then the manager, I'd like him to make a couple of comments.
Since it was brought up, about 6-8 weeks ago, we were involved in a meeting in the manager's office, and I asked you where we were at with the RFQ for doing analysis of the northeast side and southeast side. You said you were preparing the RFQ, even though I believe we asked you to do it a year ago. Where are we at on that RFQ now?
On the RFQ, we got 5 responses back, and we took a look at the responses. They were all pretty good. We did not seek to put an RFP out during the same time frame as the franchise fee vote, but we have the RFP is drafted, and it will go out to the same people It's a collaboration between our office and finance. Because we are not doing things that existed in other studies, it is simply about the GIS, GPS, and response from different stations. I would want that all to be completed by this fall, so this council can have that information and be able to digest it and take action on it in this next budget process, which would time out well for your budget analysis, any kind of votes that would be required. But that's where we're at.
So we're not sending the RFP out anytime soon.
I'd have to ask finance. It's not in my office now. We were done with it when we got done drafting it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, Chief? Chief, thanks. Mr. Manager.
Mayor and council, it's been referenced already, but please understand there's no villains in this discussion. What you've got is a budget where you've cut $30 million out of it in recent years, and when you make $30 million worth of cuts, you're going to have impacts. This particular decision that led to the discussion that I was made in the Budget Balancing Act over a couple years ago, these are very difficult things. It's never, in my experience, a matter of getting what you want in service levels. It's a matter of doing the best with what you have. And I think we're all struggling with that. So please understand there's no villains in this thing. But all of the points and the comments you're making tonight are entirely appropriate. Mr. Gatto, I think your concern about the level of service in your ward is entirely appropriate. You're doing your job. You're bringing the issues forward. That's what you should be doing as an elected official and representing your ward and calling these issues into play. Your discussion that the mayor's talking about looking at a process going forward, Chris Coleman's amendment about looking at the long term, all very appropriate. But I have one suggestion for you as you think about this. The decisions about fire service, as with any other service, need to be data-driven. You need to start with a common template about what your services are and what your response times are and how that plays out across the city. And there's a whole bunch of different variables, but be data-driven. Don't make decisions based on anecdotal evidence. Come up with data, study it carefully, agree on the kind of measures that you have, get real clear about what you're trying to measure and make sure we're measuring the right thing. And when you have the good data in front of you, then you can begin to understand what the options are and how we're doing generally. I've seen so much discussion over the years about fire service where it's predicated on information other than good data. And that doesn't really lead to good decisions. What it really leads to is a kind of really difficult discussion you've got here about people that have different opinions about this and that. But in point of fact, it's the underlying data that describes what's really happening in the real world that ought to be driving your decisions. So I hope you approve the parking lot because I think it's a necessary project and an appropriate expenditure because of the training function as well as the parking, and for the other reasons that have been noted. Your discussion about sort of taking some time to look at the issues and drill down particularly into the issues in Mr. Gatto's ward are appropriate, but you can't forget Bob's ward either because there's a lot of issues out there. Skip just alluded to it with his reference about the fire study. And we know that at the end of the day, you basically have to provide fire services across the entire city where there's equity, where you're treating everybody about the same, you're providing the same level of service. And at the end, all these things cost money, so you're going to need to match it up with that. But whatever you do, make sure you're dealing with good, hard data that accurately describes the service that's being provided so you're able to make rational decisions about it all. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, council members.
I appreciate your comments, and you and I have had this discussion before. The biggest thing, and I'm data-driven, let's make sure that everybody's using the same data. Mm-hmm. And that's very, very important, and that's why I think that everyone needs to be in the same room and say, okay, how are we going to say what a response time is? Because you get one answer from one side, and you get one answer from the other. And that's why everybody needs to be in the same room. Everybody needs to be using the same procedure to get the response time. And that's the only, and then you're right, then we do use the data and we figure it out. But we need to make sure that we're all using the same procedure to get the data. And I think that's the biggest issue that we've got right now.
I agree, and I think the matter about getting the right data, maybe take a workshop and have the chief come, or whoever you want to have, and talk about what the data is and what you're measuring, and how do you measure response time? Is it when the call comes in? Is it when the truck is dispatched? Is it when the firefighter shows up at the scene? When do you measure that, and what are the dimensions of that service that you want to measure and understand? Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is respond to somebody's very important need,
Right.
whether it's a fire or a medical situation.
And it's not just, however you want to do it, let's just make sure everybody's doing it the same way. If you want to say it's from your door to the hospital, if you want to say it's from when the call comes in to when you get there, I don't care. But I want to know that we're all doing it the same way. It doesn't matter how you measure it. It just matters that we're doing it consistently and we
Correct.
are able to get the information. So all of us here can digest what exactly is it.
But at the end of the day, you can't do it for just one area. You've got to
No.
look at the whole city, because your obligation at the end of the day is to the whole city, in providing a quality of service that's roughly fair and equal for all the citizens. of Des Moines.
And you and I have had this discussion. This pilot program, yeah, sure, it's great, but I'm not just doing it for my ward. Some things need to be switched around so the service of the city gets better.
Absolutely.
Not just Ward 4. Even though I'm here for Ward 4, but my concern is the city of Des Moines.
That's fine.
And
Yep.
and that's
Joe,
why
I
I'm here.
agree. And I think that's the purpose of why we would put together a committee or a task force to look at it and at least sort out some of those ideas, figure out where we go, what our policy should be moving forward, and quite frankly, as Mr. Coleman said, we got to look out 5-10 years. Where are we going with this? How will we supply service? Where's the service going to be needed? Where are the dollars going to come from to provide it? And I think that's the purpose of it. You've got a motion, I think.
Yes, I do.
And if you would repeat that motion.
I have a motion to deny 46 and 46A.
Deny approval.
Deny approval, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, I hit the wrong one. Sorry. Can we reset it?
Yeah, just a second. Okay, you're reset.
You can't make a motion that you vote against.
I know that.
3 yes, 4 no.
I'll move to approve that number, whatever that number was,
46 and 46A.
46 and 46A. Thank you, Jeff.
I've already spoke to my reasons.
But as we vote on this, and I want to make it perfectly clear that I don't want to say my vote is contingent on working forward, but we got to get our arms around where we're going, how we're addressing public safety, and the best of our ability within our budget constraints, make sure we have a plan moving forward for the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years that addresses public safety for our citizens in the city of Des Moines. And for me, that's what this is all about. And I think that I was one of the people that voted for this training facility, and I think that this is one of the components, at least in part of it, whether it's to put another piece of equipment out there to have our people work on and train on, or supplying parking to do that. It's possible, it's within the budget, we've got the money available, it has been set out for that purpose, but I don't want to in any way minimize the importance of the other piece, which is separate for me, but needs to be addressed immediately, how we supply the best response to our citizens moving forward, and how do we allocate dollars to make that happen. So,
I'm voting yes on this in anticipation we have further study as to how we're going to address our needs.
4 yes, 3 no.